There obviously will not be a meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin, different from what was agreed between President Trump and President Putin last week when we were in Washington together.
President thinks, because I talked to him about this. He was not happy about this news, but he was also not surprised. These are two countries that have been at war for a very long time. Russia launched this attack on Kyiv, and likewise, Ukraine recently dealt a blow to Russia's oil refineries.
But tonight we also want to talk about the big questions of our time together, because we have some tasks that we can only solve together. Unfortunately, this includes the ongoing war of Russia against Ukraine. We have to deal with this topic again today. And this before the background of the fact that there obviously will not be a meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin, different from what was agreed between President Trump and President Putin last week when we were in Washington together. I think the French-German couple is today perfectly aligned in order to have a Europe that is stronger in terms of the economy, trade, and monetarily, as well as to have a Europe that holds its geopolitical position in the conflict in Ukraine in the face of the war of aggression launched by Russia, and a Europe that looks ahead to these challenges and has decided to rearm itself to ensure its protection.
Questions on two separate issues. First of all, the drone and missile strikes that took place overnight in Ukraine. General Keith Kellogg, the president's special envoy, has described these attacks as egregious. Do you agree with that description, and do you view President Putin as an impediment to getting peace between these two countries?
Well, it's not about if I agree, it's about what the president thinks, and I know what the president thinks because I talked to him about this. He was not happy about this news, but he was also not surprised. These are two countries that have been at war for a very long time. Russia launched this attack on Kyiv, and likewise, Ukraine recently dealt a blow to Russia's oil refineries. They have taken out, as a matter of fact, 20% of Russia's oil refinery capacity over the course of their attacks throughout the month of August. So the president is continuing to watch this intently, and this killing, unfortunately, will continue as long as the war continues, which is why the president wants it to end. And that's why he's worked harder than anyone to end this war, which would have never started if he were president. But perhaps both sides of this war are not ready to end it themselves. The president wants it to end, but the leaders of these two countries need it to end and want it to end, must want it to end as well. And I think the president will make some additional statements on this later.
Mine has to do with, I just had one more, if I may. It has to do with the president's intention to remove Lisa Cook as a member of the Federal Reserve Board. He is going or acting upon allegations that have been made by Trump administration official Bill Pulte. These are just allegations. She hasn't been convicted yet of any crime. Is the administration opposed to allowing Ms. Cook to have due process, to challenge what has been alleged against her?
I believe she is challenging it. I believe she just filed a lawsuit today, and Mr. Pulte has deferred those allegations over to the Department of Justice to investigate them. What I will say is that you had these mortgage receipts very clearly shown to the president, and he has the cause that he needs to fire this individual. He laid it out in the letter that he provided to her and to the public as well. And so we'll continue to fight this battle. Carrie.
Hi, Caroline. So the president just announced that he wants to have a convention right before the midterms next year. The DNC has countered that they too want to have a convention right before the midterms as well. What's the White House's response to that? And can you give us just a little bit of a hint or a tease here as to how the president envisions a convention for the midterms?
Look, the president put out a statement on this earlier today. I'll let him speak further on the plans that he envisions, but I think he's very proud of the accomplishments and the achievements of his administration, as he should be. The most secure border in United States history, a crackdown on crime here in our nation's capital, an attack or a reversal of the attack on our energy industry from the previous administration. As I just pointed out to you, gas prices today, this Labor Day, are the lowest they've been since Labor Day in 2020. Our economy is bringing in trillions of dollars in revenue from all over the world again. So there's so much for Republicans and for the president and for Americans across the country to be proud of, and I think the president wants to see that celebrated. But for any further details on this as they come, we'll provide you with them. Iris.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions on the shooting. What's the administration's message to some concerned parents across the country who might be now worried about their kids' safety in light of the latest incident?
We completely and totally understand the concerns of parents across the country. This tragedy it's heartbreaking. As a parent myself, there are no words to describe just the heartbreak that these families must be enduring, which is why the president and the first lady have encouraged everyone to continue to pray for these families and these victims. And it's why this administration is focused on removing public safety threats from our communities. And in fact, I can share with all of you that last night in Washington, D.C., when arrests were being made, there was an arrest of a juvenile right here in D.C. in Ward 7 for threats to kidnap and injure, receiving stolen property, possession of a large capacity feeding device, unlawful possession of firearms and ammunition. A search warrant was executed, 7 firearms were recovered, and the juvenile was arrested after an investigation was initiated based on social media posts allegedly threatening violence towards a school. So this was a juvenile who was a risk to not just himself, but the community here in Washington, and he was removed from the community last night because of the law enforcement efforts of this administration. And I would also point to the statement of our wonderful First Lady that she released yesterday. She wrote, "The tragic mass killing in Minnesota illuminates the need for preemptive intervention in identifying school shooters. Early warning signs are often evident, with many individuals exhibiting concerning behaviors and making violent threats online prior to their actions. We encourage all Americans, as the old saying goes, if you see something, say something. If you see warning signs or threats, report it to law enforcement." This administration, federal law enforcement, will take those reports and those threats seriously. They will be treated as a law enforcement emergency, and we will act accordingly.
On the First Lady's statement, would the administration consider ramping up resources on these fronts to parents and schools across the country to help them look into these signs and prevent more tragedies?
It's a very fair question, Iris. As for any potential future policy decisions or funding questions, it's just been over 24 hours since this tragedy occurred. Right now we're focused on the FBI and their investigation and uncovering all the facts, and we'll leave those very important policy discussions to another day.
Thank you, Caroline.
Go ahead. Megan.
I had a question about the Lisa Cook lawsuit that you mentioned. Does the president plan to wait until that lawsuit is resolved to appoint her replacement?
I will leave that to the president to make that decision in that announcement himself. Brian.
Thank you, Caroline. Two questions. Bouncing off the CDC, situation with CDC, I'm curious if administration officials are pushing back on the president's agenda, privately, publicly, however, should they fear to lose their jobs going forward?
Look, I think if you're doing your job well, and if you are executing on the vision and the promises that the president made to the public who elected him back to this office, then you should have no fear about your job. Just do your job. That's what this president wants to see. He wants to see people solving problems. He wants to see the people who have the privilege of serving the American taxpayer and the federal government abiding by the wishes of the American taxpayers who overwhelmingly reelected him in this cabinet to make America great again, or in this case, make America healthy again.
On the Intel deal, where the U.S. got a stake in that company, there's two things I want to ask about that. The first is, what did the U.S. get back in return for that deal? And the second thing is, what are the future plans for giving any form of money to another company? It could be through the CHIPS Act, like this deal, or some other form of funds. What are the plans there by this White House administration?
Well, look, as you know, Brian, very well, because you cover it often, the Intel deal is still being ironed out by the Department of Commerce. The T's are still being crossed, the I's are still being dotted. It's very much still under discussion. But the president's thinking, I can share with you, is certainly to ensure that the United States government is making our country wealthy again and is benefiting from some of these deals. And it's a creative solution. I know it's outside the box thinking, which is uncommon in this city, but it's something that he proposed and something that the Secretary of Commerce is working on putting into action.